الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. As we continue 7:41 p.m. Wednesday, September the 22nd, the year 2021, in regards to the Gregorian calendar, which agrees, or what is correct, which is the Islamic calendar. If I'm not mistaken, I think it is the 15th night of Safar. It's the 15th night of Safar. Safar, where? Not Safar, Safar, with a sign. Safar, which is technically Thursday night, if I'm not mistaken. After Maghrib starts the new day, technically the new night. With the year now is 1443 after the migration of our Prophet ﷺ. We were discussing the affairs, brothers and sisters. We were explaining, and we continued the explanation of Hamawiyyah by the great Imam Taqiyuddin Ahmad ibn Abdul Halim ibn Abdul Salam ibn Taymiyyah الحراني الدمشقي المتوفى سنة 728 728, the great Imam Shaykh of Islam, as he continues in his book. We discussed the matter where we said that these affairs, which is pertaining to those who resorted to other than the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ as being a source relied upon in our religion, and the dangers of that. That were those who put forth their uqul, they put forth their intellects over the revelation. And you'll find that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah brings speech to clarify the magnitude of this type of ideology or this type of belief, how dangerous it is, and how destructive it is, and how detrimental it is upon mankind. Because anything that opposes the Book of Allah and is taken as a source of guidance is extremely dangerous. If it's taken as a source of guidance other than the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and that affair is given precedence over the wahy, is of the utmost of danger, and the utmost of what? Of destruction. Destructible matters for not only for the Muslims but for mankind in general. You'll find that he mentions, it says, if we just reiterate what we mentioned, we said يجب ولا يبوحون به قط ولا يدلون عليه لا نصا ولا ظاهرا. We already had taken that, or we already covered that. He says you'll find that انباط الفرس والروم والفلوخ اليهود والفلاسفة. We said that Anbatul Furs, meaning offspring of Persia and Rome. Likewise, the offspring of the Jews and the philosophers. It said that how can they clarify to the nation what is the correct belief, which is obligatory upon every mukallaf, every Muslim or everyone that has been obliged to perform those duties, and everyone is considered to be virtuous to believe. He said, for verily, if these people who are people of rhetoric and philosophy, and there are people that are mutakallif, they went the bounds where they exceeded them in overburdening themselves and transgressing them, in which is surpassing the model affairs. He said, these people who are considered people of rhetoric, the people who are transgressors, that how can these people be considered to possess the obligatory belief? He says, despite you'll find that they've been referred in their knowledge about Allah to resort to their minds and their intellects. وأن يدفعوا بمقتضى قياس عقولهم ما دل عليه الكتاب والسنة. He says also that they reject what is in accordance or what agrees with the analogies of their minds or their intellects of what the Kitab and Sunnah, what it brings forth, of what is of clarity, and whether it be in those verses that carries the clear meaning, or the verses that you'll find that they need explanation so you can attain the correct meaning. He says, now listen to this last part. I want everyone to focus on this last sentence right here. The Shaykh al-Islam mentions. He said, لَقَدْ كَانَ تَرْكُ النَّاسِ بِلَا كِتَابِ وَلَا سُنَّةٍ أَهْدَى لَهُمْ وَأَنْفَعَ عَلَى هَذَا التَّقْدِيرِ بل كان وجود الكتاب والسنة ضررا محضا في أصل الدين. He said, all these affairs are what we're saying now. He said, you'll find that philosophy and the glorification of the human mind over revelation, all of it is from the ideologies of Persia and Rome, and the offspring of the Jews and the philosophers. We're going to clarify that in a minute, inshallah. That they bring the correct belief, and that the resort to the human mind and intellect is the foundation and the source of guidance. And that these people who so-called are the founders of what has established that evil, dangerous belief of the human mind being glorified over what? Over revelation. That they're the ones who have clarified to the ummah the correct belief, where it is binding upon every Muslim and everyone virtuous to believe. If that's the case where these people are saying, so-called, that they possess the correct belief, and that they've been referred to in their knowledge of Allah, meaning to the mere aspect of their minds, and that they reject anything that goes away from their so-called analogy of their minds, of what the Kitab and Sunnah, what it indicates. Now listen to what he says in the last part here. He said, لَقَدْ كَانَ تَرْكُ النَّاسِ بِلَا كِتَابٍ وَلَا سُنَّةٍ أَهْدَى لَهُمْ. He said, if this was the case where people have not accepted this type of methodology or this type of ideas and principles, like the source of guidance is being taken and derived from the human intellect and mind, and that the Kitab and Sunnah is nothing more than something complementary, that it just, as you want to say, it just puts the icing on the cake. However, the icing can be rejected if it doesn't go along with the cake. So that's basically what they were saying. He said, if this is the case, he said, the leaving off and the people abandoning the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Message of Allah is better guidance for them and more beneficial upon this type of determination and this type of basis. Rather, the existence of the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, based upon the ideologies of these people, is a clear harm upon them in the origin and the foundation of their religion, which is very dangerous. You'll find that Shaykh al-Islam, even though he's mentioning in the context here, he's going to mention others, he's saying the source of guidance being other from the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Here in this context, he's talking about the human mind and intellect, and those who glorified it, right? Those who glorified it gave a precedence to every guidance. Anything that agrees with the human mind, that's acceptable. You'll find that also what falls into that is anything else that's taken as a source of guidance other than the Book of Allah is the same thing. Whether it be Rijal al-Qanun or Qawani wa Da'iyya, or laws that are made up by man, fall under the same pretenses. They fall under the same thing. If people take that as a source, giving precedence to that over the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, then they have taken the book and the Sunnah and left it and abandoned it, and as a result of it, the guidance other than that has been taken as a primary source, which is extremely dangerous. So basically, what was the point of the messengers coming and clarifying if the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ didn't have any type of significance? Rather, it's just something complementary, or it's just something that just, as we just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the icing on the cake. It's not the foundation, but it's just if it agrees with the source of the foundation, which is something else, the Kitab al-Sunnah is just used to decorate it, but it's not used as a foundation. So if that's the case, where the people's mindset are like this, it's better for them to be left without any book or sunnah. if you're now accepting that type of guidance and utilizing that as your primary source of guidance. Being that the case, if you want to say, they have now referred their affairs back to Jahiliyyah. And we're going to explain that in a minute, because it's going to come, inshallah. So all these affairs, two things. You'll find that the Jahiliyyah, the ways of pre-Islamic ignorance, these type of people have revived them. However, they revived them in the name of education, or high standards in regards to the human mind and intelligence. So they use what is decorated in order for that misguidance or their falsehood to be accepted. They say in the name of intelligence, or the name of utilizing your mind, or utilizing your intellect. Based upon this speech, when a person hears it, they think it's acceptable. What's wrong with the human mind and stimulating the mind and utilizing your intelligence and utilizing your rationality? What's wrong with that? If a person that does not understand the religion properly hears that without fundamentally being sound, as a result of it, they will accept this type of notion. And they would abandon the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and accepting other than that as a primary source of guidance, which is extremely dangerous. And we're going to get into the meaning of what we're mentioning. The Shaykh al-Islam is going to get also in detail a little bit in a minute. We mentioned last class where he said, for example, he said people of Anbat. Al-Anbat, meaning, he said Anbat al-Furs wal-Rum. This word Al-Anbat, Anbat with a ta. It says قوم كانوا يسكنون بين العراقين يعني بين الشام والعراق. He said they were people that used to live, or they resided. They lived and resided between the two Iraqs. What is the two Iraqs? Sham, between Sham and Iraq. They used to live in between them. Or they used to live in Sawad al-Iraq. They used to live in the dark parts, or I think the most crowded parts of Iraq. You'll find that their employment was to extract water from the earth, from the bottom of the earth. And the people usually who were involved in this type of employment, they were people from Persia and Rome. And they weren't people of knowledge. However, when Shaykh al-Islam mentioned this word, it's not because he was trying to malign them or degrade them. However, what he was trying to prove is something. What he was trying to say is, Bayan annahum laysu min ahl ilm. He said, however, his intention behind mentioning this type of, or using this type of speech, is to show that these people are not qualified, nor were they from the people of knowledge. Meaning people that utilize the mind or the intellect, glorifying it over the revelation, they weren't from the people of knowledge. And the origins came from these type of people. Meaning people of Persia and Rome that had no correct information as far as regards to the religion of Islam. So these are the type of people that Shaykh al-Islam was using when he said Anbat, the Anbat of Furs al-Rum, meaning that they were not people of knowledge, meaning correct, sound knowledge. He said, like we mentioned, Anbat, they were people, they used, like we said, their job or their occupation was just to extract water from the ground. And like we said, his intent in this context was not to degrade them. He was just trying to show a point that these people are not people of what? Of knowledge. That's it. So basically, just to sum it up, they were people who were juhal. They were people of ignorance. They were not people from, or they were from the ujum, meaning people who were from the non-Arab that came in, brought along this type of outside foreign knowledge in which the religion had no connection with. And then some of the people, due to their weak mind or their ignorance, adopted it. Brought it in to the religion, incorporated it, and then they made it so-called acceptable knowledge in the religion of Islam. Where Shaykh al-Islam wanted to bring clarity that this affair was what? Foreign. It had no connection in its origin to the revelation at all. These affairs, a person would say, Abdur Razzaq, why are you so-called focusing on this so much? Because if you was to go on YouTube and not having this type of knowledge, and listen to people such as Hamzah Yusuf and other than them, who glorify these type of people, saying so-called Islamic philosophers. Islamic philosophers? A'udhu billah. Islamic thinkers, Islamic rationalists, Islamic intellectualists. There's no such thing. The whole pretense or the whole details of what we're clarifying now, you see Shaykh al-Islam is what? Showing that these affairs are not connected. They're all foreign. They're detached from one another. They're not together. It's like saying Islam it's like saying Islam and Kufr are together. Or Islam and disbelief or belief in faith, or belief and disbelief are all good things, and they bring good things to the religion, to the people. Does that make any sense?
No.
Kufr and Iman brings good things to the people. It brings enlightenment. It opens up the heart. When a person says this to this, anyone that has any sound intellect that hears this type of speech is saying you lost your mind. The same thing that Shaykh al-Islam is trying to clarify here. That these affairs that are foreign in its origin originated from this type of background, which is the origin of disbelief in its people. There's no way you can now incorporate it with revelation and then try to make it acceptable. He said, however, the Muslims did accept it. So it's as if they almost accepted kufr and their religion in order to so-called understand it better. Is it clear? Understand what I'm saying, everyone?
No.
This is what he's trying to mention. He said, and if that's the case, where not only did they accept it, but they say that's the primary source. That's the source of guidance. That's the people where they're supposed to take it from. If Kitab and Sunnah agrees with it, we accept it. But if not, it's rejected. He said if that was the case, and this was the so-called correct way, the abandonment of the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was more well befitting. If this was the case. So these are the affairs he's trying to what? Clarify. And say the dangers and the magnitude of the danger of what we're mentioning here. He said because we know that the majority of these ideologies of disbelief, emanates from where? The people of disbelief, the people from the Jews and the Christians, and especially the Jews, which we'll talk about inshallah. A person would say how? The origin of the Jahmiyyah went back to who, everyone? Back to a Jew who did magic upon the Prophet ﷺ. That was the origin of the Jahmiyyah. So it went back from someone from the people of the book who's Jewish, who did magic upon the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. So the origin of the deviant sects of the belief that Allah is not above the throne emanated from an individual who's from the Jews. So that's the reason why when Shaykh al-Islam is mentioned in this book, that he what? He hit the goal. He threw the dart and he knew exactly what he was speaking about. He said the Yahud from Furs and also the ideologies of philosophy and so-called rationalists, all of them came from whom? From Rome. And the likes of them. From Plato to Socrates, all of them went back to where? To Greek, from those who came up with Greek mythology, where at the same time they were philosophers. From, as we mentioned before, from Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and the likes of them. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone?
Yes.
Fine. So, Shaykh al-Islam mentioned this. He said, وَفُرُوخَ الْيَهُودِ وَالْفَلَاسِفَةِ, the offspring of the Jews and the philosophers. He knew exactly what he was speaking about. He was on point, rahimahullah. He said, لَإِنْ كَانَ مَا يَقُولُهُ هَؤُلَاءِ الْمُتَكَلِّمُونَ وَالْمُتَكَلِّفُونَ. We just read it quickly. If these were people they were saying was the truth, these people that would transgress the bounds, they overseeded them, overburdened themselves, went outside the model of affairs. If they possessed was the correct i'tiqad, and that they're the ones who's referred to in their knowledge upon Allah, and that's referred back to the mere mind and intellect, and that is whatever's rejected, that we leave off what so-called goes in accordance with the analogies of their mind, and what the Kitab and Sunnah, what it indicates, then it was better for the people just to abandon Kitab and Sunnah altogether. And that would be considered more as they, in their minds or in their type of way, being more beneficial and being more guided if they take based upon this type of determination. So you're just saying that what, everyone? We just re-emphasize what was just already mentioned. So you see the high magnitude of the danger that they're saying, and the type of so-called philosophical terms that we utilize in order to reject and instill doubt in the Muslims as regards to acceptance or accepting what we're mentioning. For example, where they say that the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, if it's ahad, we reject it. If it came from one rawi, if it came from one narrator, it's speculation. Why? Because one narrator is subjected to doubt, because he so-called could have made a mistake. So based upon that, we reject it. That's because it came from the aspect of what they call ahad, one narrator, right? Then they said mutawatir, it has to reach that level. But despite of it reaching that magnitude, that high level of authenticity, they still say, all right, we say it's qat'i thubut, as we mentioned. We say it's been established as far as what? As far as all the prerequisites of authenticity. We said that, we'll say that, we'll acknowledge that. However, what it indicates is speculative. What it indicates is speculative. So you see here these type of words, a person that's not educated in religion, they will think, oh, mashallah, these people are highly educated. Not realize what they're saying is satanic. Oh man, they use some big vocabulary words, just as the people use these days of falsehood. They come with English and they make you feel like you're just so uneducated. They come with these words that goes over your mind, and then you think in your mind, man, I'm just so stupid, listen to them talk. I'm just so dumb. Oh man, I just hope to love and be with. Not realizing these people are shayateen. You're just as smart as they are. Rather, the Bedouin Arab, who believed that Allah was above the heavens and knew the basic belief of that, was better than the individual who came, as we'll talk about that poetry when I have some time, when he came with some so-called rhetoric or decorated speech and denied that Allah was above. And how many people do we hear this? They come with high so-called eloquence, denying the existence of Allah or denying that Allah is above the arsh, when the basic common folk who probably didn't even finish high school is better than you. Meaning better than that individual that's coming with that false speech. Because he believes in his Lord in a proper way, even though his English might not be that eloquent. You are better than that individual. And you'll find that a lot of these people and these callers out there, they do this in order to so-called have the people or trap them and allure them, fall into the satanic trap until they be from their followers. And then as a result of it, if they die in that state, it could be a reason for their demise in the hereafter. These affairs are extremely dangerous. Let's go on to read what Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah says. So he goes on, let's read the next affair, everyone. فإن حقيقة الأمر ما يقوله هؤلاء أنكم يا معشر العباد لا تطلبوا معرفة الله وما يستحقه من الصفات نفيا وإثباتا لا من الكتاب ولا من السنة. So let's read it quickly. So he said, just to sum it up, put in perspective, even though they're saying it in a decorated way. He said, however, what it goes back to, everyone, and just to re-emphasize what Shaykh al-Islam has mentioned here, rahimahullah, and another affair. Just know for sure that everything that we're studying now, all the different doubts, goes back to this one thing. And another, in the second I'm going to mention in a minute. But one of these affairs that just know, everything that we're studying, the belief, for example, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no names, He has no attributes, that Allah might have some, or that we might distort certain meanings, that it doesn't mean the fingers of Allah. It means, for example, something that Allah will create and that thing will hold up the heavens and the earth. Just know for sure, brothers and sisters, all these affairs is a type of atheism. The ultimate goal of all of these ideologies is atheism. And all of it is a branch of atheism. It's that ultimately the goal is to deny Allah Ta'ala's what? His existence. Because if you deny some so-called chip away, a shaitan would chip away. He did it with the Jahmiyyah. They gave it Allah's names and attributes altogether. So basically, you'll find what the ulama mentioned about the Jahmiyyah is that they what? أَنَّهُمْ يَعْبُدُونَ عَدَمًا. He said that the Jahmiyyah and the ideologies of the negation of Allah's names and attributes altogether is that they now worship a deity that doesn't exist. This is a type of what? It's a type of ilhad. It's a type of what, everyone? It's a type of atheism. So the ideologies of Jahmiyyah, all of it, the goal of it is atheism. That's all it is. If you believe that point, then you'll be able to understand all this book altogether. If you understand that one point, you will understand probably all of this. All of this is what we're studying now. We're given the details of ultimately, the ultimate goal, inevitably, was to lead the people down the road to atheism. Because that's what philosophy does. Philosophy ultimately is to what? So say there's a rational explanation for everything. There's no unseen force. There's something we could give a rational explanation for this, rational explanation for that. That's the reason why if you even go to the Mu'tazila, they deny the punishment of the grave. They deny it based upon the fact that they say there's a rational explanation of why so-called the people are being tortured, even though you don't see it. And if you don't see it, that means it's not happening. It doesn't exist. If we lift open the grave of someone, we don't see no punishment. If that's the case, we negate it. Like we said, the ultimate goal of all these affairs, brothers and sisters, is the negation of Allah's existence, the negation of the revelation, causing doubt within Allah Ta'ala's truth, and the denial of all the usul, the foundations that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala sent down with all of the prophets and the messengers. From them, like we said, is the belief in the hereafter, or the punishment of the grave, or affairs that's connected with the unseen, or affairs connected with the angels and magic. They deny all of that. If you go back to the usul of the Mu'tazila, that's from their affairs. They negate and deny all of that. Why? Because they're trying to rationalize. Everything has a rational explanation to it. All these affairs go down the road of what? As I said, ultimately the goal is ilhad. The goal is atheism. Is it clear, everyone?
Yes.
I'm sorry. طيب. So he said, فَحَقِّقَةَ الْأَمْرِ عَلَى مَا يَقُولُ هَؤُلَاءِ. He said, this is awesome. So keep in mind, the goal is ilhad. Same thing with the Mu'tazila, the negation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we affirm the names but no attributes. You're still negating Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're still negating Him. It still ultimately goes back to ilhad. Then the Ash'ari, they just play games. We'll talk about that in a minute. For verily, Shaykh al-Islam adds another point. He said, all of this is what we're saying now. The reality of the affairs that what these people are saying, Ya ma'shar al-ibad, what they're trying to say is based upon the fact that you need to glorify your intellect, or glorify politics, or glorify liberalism, or glorify communism, or you glorify all these affairs. Make that the primary source over the book and the sunnah. Make the primary source of so-called we need to now come up with the times, or we need to so-called modernize everything. Everything needs to be now modernized, so it can catch up with society. You guys are still living in the times as they call Raj'iyah, the dinosaur bone times, even though we don't believe in that. But that's what they say. What they call Qidam al-Alam. We know that's also kufr. Qidam, the ancient time of dinosaurs, is also kufr. We'll talk about that in a due time. But anyway, what these people are trying to summarize and say, everyone, that people who say this, that you need to glorify liberalism, we need to glorify philosophy and make that the source, not Kitab al-Sunnah. We need to glorify democracy, liberalism, all these affairs. That's the primary source. Get rid of religion altogether. Make that the primary source. All of these affairs, it's just what Shaykh al-Islam is saying right here in this line. He said, know for sure, O worshippers, these people are saying, do not seek your knowledge of Allah and what He deserves of names and attributes, of what we negate from Him and what we affirm from Him. Do not seek it from the book of Allah. Do not seek it from the sunnah and the message of Allah. Do not seek it from the methodology of this ummah. Even though they're not saying it verbally, especially those who ascribe themselves to Islam, but in the back of their mind, they want another type of guidance, even though they might say they're Muslim. And this is the state of a lot of those who are upon deviation. In our country, in our city, and in others all around the world. Even though they're Muslim, they won't say it to your face, because they know once you say it, exposes them. But if you really contemplate on what they're seeking and what they're doing, you'll find that what they're trying to do in regards to our Lord, and as far as His names and His attributes, and even His Sharia, and even in the proper guidance of the legislative affairs that Allah has legislated in His Messenger, they are saying, do not seek these affairs with Allah, or your knowledge about your Lord and what He deserves of glorification of His Sharia, or glorification of His name and His attributes, of what we affirm for our Lord or negate from Him. Don't seek it from the book of Allah. Don't seek it from the sunnah message of Allah. Do not seek it from the salaf of the ummah. However, انظروا أنتم فما وجدتموه مستحقا له من الأسماء والصفات فصفوه به. However, look to what you find of what you think he deserves, of his names and his attributes, describe him with it. سواء كان موجود, doesn't matter, doesn't make a difference. Whether it exists in the book of Allah or in the sunnah of the message of Allah, it doesn't matter. If it affirms it or not, at the end of the day, who cares? أو لم يكن, if it's not there, it doesn't matter, it's the same. And what you did not find of what Allah deserves, and it goes against your minds and your intellect, even if it goes against it and it opposes your mind and your rationality, don't now describe Allah with it. Believe what your mind say, do not take what the revelation says. This is what the people are saying here. Even though they're not saying directly, this is what it implies. These are the implications. And some of them will just say it frankly. ثُمَّ هُمْ هَا هُنَا فَرِيقًا. Now listen to this. Shaykh al-Islam goes on to say, he said, now you'll see that there are two parties. He said, even though they're upon another methodology, even though they're upon this misguided methodology and this misguided way, he said you'll find them different. This is in every person that seeks guidance in other than the book of Allah, in the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and they do not make their unification or their solidarity based upon what aids Allah and His religion, you'll find that they'll always start breaking down to other sects and other parties. And they will always start arguing and differing. Now listen to what he says. هَا هُنَا فَرِيقًا. There are two parties. أَكْثَرُهُمْ يَقُولُونَ. Now listen to what he says. The majority of them said, meaning the first type, مَا لَمْ تُثْبِتُهُ عُقُولُكُمْ فَانْفُوهُ. Whatever the mind does not affirm, negate it. Whatever the mind does not affirm, then negate it. If the mind doesn't affirm it, even though the Kitab and Sunnah does, but your mind does not affirm it, negate it. Even though Allah and His Messenger said otherwise. So that's one group. وَمِنْهُمْ مَن يَقُولُ بَلْ تَوَقَّفُوا فِيهِ. He said, and from them who says, just be what? Take the neutral position. وَمَا نَفَاهُ قِيَاسُ عُقُولِكُمْ الَّذِي أَنْتُمْ فِيهِ مُخْتَلِفُونَ. He says, so now you have people who what? Negate it, frankly, and then you have those who want to so-called what? Take the neutral position. So notice Shaykh al-Islam is educating the Muslims to say, all these positions are what? Incorrect. Because you'll find Muslims out there that like to say, I'm neutral. I'm neutral. I'm not with the truth and I'm not with the falsehood. I'm just neutral. So notice Shaykh al-Islam is condemning all this type of ways. It's not acceptable. So this is what he goes on to say. One party, لَمَّا لَمْ تُثْبِتُهُ عُقُولُكُمْ فَانْفُوهُ. What the mind does not affirm, just negate it. Another of them say, بَلْ تَوَقَّفُوا فِيهِ. Be neutral. وَمَا نَفَاهُ قِيَاسُ عُقُولِكُمْ. He says, in what? The analogy of your minds, what it negates, he says, in which you amongst yourselves are differing and are disturbed to the point of differing and of bickering amongst yourselves. He said, more do you'll find of those who differ on the face of the earth. As we just talked about this maybe a couple months ago, that the people of logic and the people who busied themselves with those affairs, they were all, the things that caused them doubt is that they were always comparing arguments. And they never came to a what? A resolve. They never came to a conclusion. They would read this argument, read this argument, read that argument, read that argument, read this argument, read this argument, busy themselves to the point where they wasted all their time. Because you have to have a source that you respect and you glorify and you have total trustworthiness with, that will cut the what? That will cut the bickering between the parties. That's the reason why you'll find that, like we said and mentioned here, that what happened is, based upon the fact that they always read this argument and that argument and that back, and this is back forth, but this says that, and he refutes that, and he goes back, without there being a primary source of refers back to the Kitab and Sunnah. As a result of it, they became in a state where it was very dangerous, where everything was upon ikhtilaf. Pay attention, everyone. Everything is based upon ikhtilaf. That's what goes back to the book of Allah. فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ إن كنتم تؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر ذلك خير وأحسن تأويلا. If you differ in anything, take it back to the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Take it back to Allah and His Messenger. Know for sure, anyone that opposes that ayah, they will be in the what? The most greatest state of shiqaq, and the greatest state of what? Of disunity, and bickering, and arguing amongst themselves, without any exception to the rule. Those who did not use that ayah, and they're just relying on this person, this intellect, this intellectualist, this rationalist, this respected person of intelligence, coming with this argument, and this argument seems like it's a little bit better than this one and that one to the end of it. They will never cease to be in a what? State of what? Disunity amongst themselves. You'll find that Allah Ta'ala even says that about them. Where He says in His book, about the what? About the Sahaba. فَإِنْ آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا فَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَإِنَّمَا هُمْ فِي شِقَاقٍ فَسَيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. He says, if they believe, how you believe, meaning that they have now understood the religion based upon the book of Allah, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and the understanding of the companions, they abandon that guidance, know for sure they're in shiqaq. They will be in a state where they're breaking up and they're bickering amongst themselves and they're still dividing. And Allah will suffice you if you hold on to His proper guidance. That's the reason why Shaykh al-Islam, if you go back to what he's saying, what is he saying here? He said, from your parties who negated, from your parties who so-called neutral. He says, in which you are different in amongst yourselves, a ikhtilaf, a differing. He said, more than the majority of the people on the face of the earth are different. He said, فَانْفُوهُ وَإِلَيْهِ عِنْدَ التَّنَازُعْ فَارْجِعُوا فَإِنَّهُ الْحَقَّ الَّذِي تَعْبَدْتُكُمْ بِهِ. He says, for verily this is based upon this. You guys were made you in this state where y'all separated amongst yourselves and y'all arguing and bickering amongst yourselves. You did not refer your affairs back to the book of Allah, taking the proper guidance in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned in His book. That if you now fall into these affairs that will cause disunity and separation amongst yourselves, take it back to what? The book of Allah and the Sunnah. But however, they don't glorify the ayat in the book of Allah. So as a result of it, what happened? They differed amongst themselves until they didn't come to any resolution. They just kept breaking off, and he said, this is the type of what? This is the truth in which you're supposed to be worshiping your Lord by. He said, you abandoned it. He said, وَمَا كَانَ مَذْكُورًا فِي الْكِتَابِ وَالسُّنَّةِ مِمَّنْ يُخَالِفُ قِيَاسَكُمْ هَذَا أو يثبت ما لم تدركه عقولكم على طريقة أكثرهم فاعلموا أني أمتحنكم بتنزيله لا لتأخذوا الهدى منه لكن لتجتهدوا في تخريجه على شواذ اللغة. Now that's what we're going to discuss right now. It's time. Yo, car, here or out there? I thought you was going. Is this translated in there? It's in here, isn't it? It's there?
I just don't know where you are.
It's right there. Brothers, didn't I not tell the brothers, I said read it before I come here? It's right there. It's right there. It's right there. It's right there. You read it? You got it? You read along with it?
I actually read it I read it repeatedly. I didn't read it since I got it.
G. But notice that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, he goes on to say, he said, based upon the two ways and the two parties that you're broken down into, from those who say that what the mind is affirmed, or what the mind is not affirmed for Allah, then negate it. And then some of them say, like I said, they'll come to this affair and they'll say, just take the neutral position. Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah had mentioned and said, which is called the Jumlatun I'tiradiyah. He said, in which you amongst yourselves are different and disturbed to the point, you reach the point amongst yourselves, you differ so much more than the face of the people of the earth. Based upon that, if everything of what the analogy of your minds negates, you have what? You negate it. He said, if this is the case, why would you now be in a state where you rely upon an affair that has no conclusion? Doesn't make any sense. Why would you put your trust in an affair that has no resolve, no unification? Everything is just arguing without any conclusion. Who would want to be in that state? To this point, even with the non-Muslims amongst themselves, from those who are in politics, how many times do we hear the so-called Democrats arguing with the what? Republicans. How many years have we seen since we've been born the Republicans arguing with the what? Democrats. Did they ever come to a resolved conclusion? Outwardly, amongst the people, even though themselves they probably play golf amongst each other and laughing. But I'm talking about the outwardly. Do they display any type of solidarity amongst themselves? Not ever. They're always different. Oh, this policy doesn't work because of this. That policy doesn't work because of this. This didn't work because of this. That didn't work because of this. Did this happen? That didn't work because of that. Did they ever come to a resolve to the point where what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about them actualized? لا يزالون مختلفون ما يزال مختلفين فيه إلا من رحم ربك ولذلك خلقه ولذا خلقه. But no, just go outside. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this book, they are continued to differ amongst themselves without any conclusion, whether it be the Republics, whether it be the Democrats, whether it be the Conservatives, or whether it be from the so-called, what do they call them?
Independent.
No. What's the opposite of the Conservatives?
Liberals.
It's the Liberalists or Conservatives. So you now have Democrats, Republicans, Liberalists, and the opposite of them is what? Conservatives. The Liberalists do not, they believe religion is the problem. But ultimately all of them are together. But outwardly what they display is what? Disunity. We don't agree with you in this, we don't agree with you with that. This policy didn't work, well he lied here. All of you are liars. Democrats and Republicans. All of you are kidhabun. All you lie to the people. The point of the matter is to show that what everyone? That what they outwardly display is what? Is different. There is no resolution. There is no point in which the niza' or the argument amongst them will stop. If that's the case, why would you want to take as a religion or to draw close to a way or a way of living that the people are always arguing and different amongst themselves without a resolution? The same thing that happened with these people is the exact same affair with Shaykh al-Islam is mentioned here. He said these people who now have fell into these affairs, he said you'll find you are the most differing amongst the people on the face of the earth. Why would I want to accept that as a guidance? Then he goes on to say, وَمَا كَانَ كَذَلِكَ وَإِلَيْهِ عِنْدَ التَّنَازُعِ فَارْجِعُوا. He said, if you truly believe in the Kitab and Sunnah. And for example, I'm going to just read quickly what he's mentioning here. He said, for verily, whoever studied the states of the people of rhetoric, and they made that their foundation instead of the Book of Allah, the Sunnah message of Allah, of their source of guidance, and they took that source of guidance and threw it behind their backs and put forth their so-called minds, you'll find that they never came into conclusion. Rather, they just broke down to different sects, and each one became worse as far as its talbis, as far as its deceit and its confusion to the people. The Jahmiyyah started. They started to break up the Ummah. When they broke up the Ummah, when they started to now deviate from what was correct, they are the ones who caused the ikhtilaf. What's so-called crazy in these days and times, the Salafis and the people of Sunnah are always called the people of disunity. Where the people who adopted the false beliefs and deviation, they're the ones that caused the disunity. It's the opposite. But look how Shaitan switches it. To make you think that the solidarity is in the hands of the people of deviation, and then the people of the Sunnah, they're the source of the problem. Rather, it's the opposite. Because anybody who seeks a guidance other than what's in Kitab and Sunnah, upon the methodology and the understanding other than the way of the Salaf, are causing disunity amongst the Muslims and the people. No matter who it is. Even if the people of disunity are thousands, if not millions, and the people of the Sunnah are just maybe a handful. Those 5 people are upon the truth. They're the ones who's calling to solidarity, and those who are upon different paths other than that, even if there are billions of people, they're all in the state of what? Disunity. And they're the ones who will be upon the path of destruction. And we know that Allah Ta'ala says in this book, He said in this book, وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala says in this book, if you would obey the majority of the people on the earth, they will lead you away and astray from the path of Allah. To let you know that the majority of people are in what? A state of misguidance. طيب. For those who study the Ahwal Ulama al-Kalam, they will come to this conclusion. You'll find that those who negate the names and attributes of Allah altogether, such as the Jahmiyyah. Then you'll find from them who affirm the names without negating the attributes with the Mu'tazila. He said, then you'll find from those who branched off another deviant sect to cause more confusion, where they now came with a group called the Asha'ira, where they gather between everything. They gather between some of the characteristics of Allah that they affirm, and then some characteristics they distort its meaning, and then certain characteristics they just negate it altogether. So it basically started from one problem, then it branched off into another confusion, and then it branched off to something more confusing. And this is how it always happens to those who deviate in the primary source of guidance, meaning fundamentally in a religion. This is what they end up doing. And this will cause more confusion, and this is what has happened all over the Muslim world. Then Shaykh al-Islam goes on to say, he says, وَإِلَيْهِ عِنْدَ التَّنَازُعِ. He said, when it was binding upon you of what was supposed to be, what you were supposed to do, which Allah gave us as a solution, is عِنْدَ التَّنَازُعِ فَارْجِعُوا. When you differ, you're supposed to take it back. And this was the truth in which you're supposed to worship your Lord by. He said, however, وَمَا كَانَ مَذْكُورًا فِي الْكِتَابِ وَالسُّنَّةِ مِمَّا يُخَالِفُ قِيَاسَكُمْ هَذَا أو يثبت ما لم تدركه عقولكم على طريقة أكثرهم فاعلموا أني أمتحنكم بتنزيله لا لتأخذوا الهدى منه. So this is what Shaykh al-Islam is now trying to establish upon them. And Shaykh al-Islam is always coming at them fundamentally. He's doing it in a way to refute them and at the same time discipline them to bring them back to the truth. To let you know that these affairs of what you're doing now are all something that is fundamentally incorrect. It goes back to the most greatest of all atrocities, which is deviation in fundamentals. And what is considered as a source of guidance. That's something that's extremely dangerous. So he's coming and focus on the root of the problem. That's why, if you notice, he keeps focusing on that every time. He goes on to say, he said, what is mentioned in the book of Allah and the Sunnah, the message of Allah, of what opposes your analogies in your minds, so it doesn't matter what is affirmed or what it negates of your minds. He said, or upon the methodology of the majority of these people. He said, know for sure that I'm now challenging you. He says, I'm challenging you to bring something in which to now, not to take as a source of guidance, but to let you know of what you're doing is incorrect. Now listen to this. So a person would say, based upon the statement, if you look in what we were reading, this needs to be explained so everyone can understand it properly. Shaykh al-Islam is trying to correct their foundation. He's saying, what you find in Kitab al-Sunnah of the characteristics that Allah affirmed for Himself. You saying that if it opposes your mind, you saying وَهِيَ مُخَالَفَةُ عُقُولِكُمْ. He said, we're not doing this in order for the ultimate goal that you take it as a source of guidance. However, I'm doing this in order to test you. Test you what? He says, of what will be the outcome of this test that I'm challenging you by. Meaning from the names and the attributes you negated. For example, if you were to now challenge the people who started all of these atrocities, at the head of those deviant sects were the Jahmiyyah. He says, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ كَانَتْ نَتِيجَةَ الْإِمْتِحَانِ عِنْدَهُ نَفْيُ الصِّفَاتِ وَإِثْبَاتِ الْأَسْمَاءِ الْجَامِدَةِ. He said, when Shaykh al-Islam challenged them and brought this test to them, he said, from the heads of all of those deviant sects were the Jahmiyyah. What happened as a result of it? What was the end of the test? What was the result of this test? The names and the attributes of Allah were negated. And then some of them they negated the attribute, or they established the names without the what? Attributes, or the meaning, to those names. So all of these different tests that Shaykh al-Islam was bringing, he was saying, I'm going to tell you and I'm going to test you to ultimately draw up the conclusion that what you're upon is incorrect. That the ultimate goal was ilhad, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. The ultimate goal is atheism. The ultimate goal is doubt. The ultimate goal of these affairs are confusion. The ultimate goal is to instill inside of the Muslims doubt concerning their Lord. That's the ultimate goal of all of this. Does it bring any surety? Does it bring any stability? Does it bring absolute, concrete affairs that are substantial, that supports of what opposes Kitab al-Sunnah? That's what's been utilized. The affairs, like we said, the outcome of it is all dangerous. All of it is what? Just absolute hayra, confusion, disturbance, doubt. Ultimately, it gives back to ilhad, and will also go back to is the people leaving off and abandoning Kitab and Sunnah. And they even go out to now expand the circle, which was another affair that's dangerous, which is called unifications of the religions. And then they'll expand it further and further, where every ideology is now acceptable, no matter what it is. Once with one circle, one hole of deviation is open, know for sure it's going to expand, and it will get wider and wider and wider and wider. And it will never stop. Until everyone is put inside of the circle. Until all people are considered guided. No matter what you're upon. And no matter what you're doing. Or what you believe. Or what you take as a creed or way of life. Or lifestyle of life. It's all acceptable. And all of this is satanic. Brothers will say, what's wrong with that? Brothers and sisters, if you really study the notions and the ideologies of these people, to open up the doors of communism and liberalism and all these affairs, the society would destroy itself and crumble. That's what you see what's happening here in America right now. The society is falling apart. They sought guidance other than what Allah's messenger set down. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down to his messenger, What happened as a result of it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala humiliated the call. Now you see the society falling apart. How can you see, how in the world do you think a society could be ran based upon opposing the poor and exploiting them and making the rich rich? How do you think that is a so-called justful society? How? How can you make a society that the poor are exploited and treated to a point as if they're just downtrodden, lower idiotic, filthy people. That the only reason why you're here is because you decided to be here. If you were to put forth a strong effort, you would get yourself out of this position. First of all, you made the affairs of accomplishment already, where people are already ahead of the game by 100 miles as soon as they're born into the world. From the riches of what was distributed amongst the people economically. How a lot of the people who are so-called rich class is not because they deserve it, they're animals, if not worse. They're filthy and nasty just like the other people who had oppressed a certain people and took their wealth from them. And utilized them to what? To do their work while they sat and enjoyed, collected the wealth. What happens is, what you now oppress the people, you were just as savagery, you were upon savagery, if not worse. The generations of your family that came after the fact had a 100-mile head start before any individual. What came as a result of it is what, everyone? Once a person comes into this world where they're poor, you already have a 100-mile head start ahead of me. Where I came into the world, my mother was up on crack. I had to figure out how to get my own diapers. I had to figure out that to deal with a whole bunch of all these different types of ways. I'm not saying to rely on this, but this is the state of certain people when they come into this world. And to say, ultimately, you're in this state because you didn't work hard enough. You think that's fair in regards to people who's already had a 100-mile head start before an individual that came into this world? Now they have to struggle and figure it out. Where they did not have the same support and the same advantages. Where they had to struggle to get where they were. Then to say that this is a what? A so-called just established society based in this manner. Not only just in the affairs of economics, but even in the affairs of religion and belief about their Lord. Where you knew that when you brought these people over here, they were Christians. You know that the majority of them were Muslimun. And you stripped it away from them. And you even warped their minds in believing that this filth of Christianity is what's the haq, where it isn't. Where you knew that they were Muslimun when they were brought over here. So not only that, you stole their families away from them. You stole their families, you stole their wealth, you stole their backgrounds, you stole their religion from them. What's more left than you could do to mess up a people? Then you made them believe that this nonsense of Christianity is the truth. Until they blindly follow it and will kill and argue you over it. Based upon emotions, not based upon facts. Because once the facts is established, it's clearly shown that Christianity is batil. However, the point of what we're trying to say is, how in the world do you think that these are the people, or these lands, that are so-called considered advanced, and so-called advanced in certain ways, and so-called intelligence, in all these matters, but at the same time, the society is falling apart? Another thing that we want to say, and this doesn't make sense, and I said this years ago in the 90s, the whole capital of America one time, it was Washington, D.C. At one time, they had the highest crime rate of murders and fatalities in the country. If the main land in which the whole land is governed from has the majority of the violence and the most fatalities, how in the world can you think that land is upon proper guidance? It does not make any sense. If you go back to the facts, at one time, Washington, D.C. had the highest crime rate in the whole country. The source in the land of so-called, of what the whole land is governed from, had the most crime. What do you think in the world that the rest of the states and the cities going to be like? If they can't even control their own area, where their so-called government or their so-called administration of affairs are now emanating from, is not what? Stable. And then not only that, you want to spread that same protocol and way of life to other lands? And then as a result of it, the Muslims are weak enough to accept this nonsense. To accept democracy and the filth of it. And the chaos. You see the results of democracy right in front of you. You see it. Go outside. Bang, 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 bang. That's what it goes to. That's the result of it. That's why I despise Catholic politics. And when Muslims go near it, it despises me that they even go near it. Because you see your children dying in front of you. You see it. Why in the world would you even want to vote and be anywhere near that filthy politics? I'm not voted for any of those people. Haven't done anything for society, no matter how many promises they came with and policies they were going to promise to do. It never stopped. The exploitation of the poor became worse and worse, and the rich became more rich and rich. And the violence in the neighborhoods became worse and worse. And to the point now where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making where the violence is creeping in their neighborhoods now. You thought it's only just for the poor. Allah humiliates you now, making it in your neighborhood. When you're trying to escape it, you find it there now. Because all the people are losing their minds. This is the result of seeking guidance in other than the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. This is the type of humiliation that comes to all humanity as a result of abandonment of Kitab and Sunnah. And the result of abandoning the proper guidance and the proper understanding of Islam. This is the result of it. All you have to do is open the masjid door, look around you, see the gunshots, see the corners, see the state of the people. That's what you do when you so-called free the minds of the people. You're not freeing the minds of the people. You're just switching them from one type of slavery to another type of slavery. You went from the slavery of human beings to now making them slavery to their own lusts and desires. And to their own whims and to their own way of thinking. You made them a slave of it. When you make a person a slave of their own whims and desires, that also brings forth destruction. At any rate, your father, Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, I'm going to say this the last part of the prayer. He said, no, for sure. He says, أَنِّي أَمْتَحِلُكُمْ بِتَنْزِيلِهِ. I'm testing you to bring forth this affair of yours. He said, I'm challenging you. Bring forth your ideologies. Bring forth your glorification of the human intellect and mind. Bring it forth. He said, not to take guidance from it, but I'm going to show you the result of it. That's what he's saying here, if you look at your books and look to what was translated. He's saying, I'm challenging you to bring it. Not to take guidance from it, but to show you the result of it. He said that the result of what you so-called bring in is, number one, is atheism. Negation of Allah's names and attributes is a form of atheism. If not, it is atheism. The negation that, for example, the statement which is the affair of the Jahmi. Then the affair of the Mu'tazila is the establishment of Allah's names, but they don't indicate any meanings. That's also something that brings doubt and confusion. So when I say Allah is Hakeem, He has no hikmah. Allah is wise, but He has no wisdom. Absolute nonsense. What are you talking about? So when I recite in the Quran, when I recite an ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Inna Allah Azizun Hakeem, it doesn't mean anything. He says, I'm bringing this to test you, to know that this nonsense, this is what it leads to. Negation of Allah, doubt concerning the creation, concerning their Lord. The third thing that he says, I'm challenging you by, then you have the other confusion. This is where Shaykh al-Islam is going to stop at. He said, now, this is where we'll stop at today, He said, لكن لتجتهدوا في تخريجه على شواذ اللغة. He said, not to take guidance from it, however, in order for you to be hard working and diligent, and now to extract what you're saying and establish it upon the most strangest of affairs in regards to the Arabic language. What is he talking about? Now he's focusing on the Asha'ira again. As we know, the Asha'ira came with an i'tiqad or belief or a methodology that's more confusing to the people. So the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila, they're your enemy that said, listen, we're not going to confuse you. We're just going to say to your face, listen, names and attributes of Allah, khalas, done. So, I can keep it moving. You guys are clear in your misguidance. Your call to the hellfire is clear. Just going to negate Allah's names and attributes. Or we negate Allah's names, but we affirm His names, but they have no indication of meanings. Alright, so, alhamdulillah, your call to hell is clear. So, I can rest and know for sure that I don't have to bother with you. The problem was the Asha'ira. So Shaykh al-Islam said they gather between everything. They gather between ithbat, ta'wil, and nafi. Affirmation, distortion of the meaning, and negating it altogether. For example, the Asha'ira, in regards to the fingers of Allah, and I want you to have a better posture when you sit to when you take a knowledge. In regards to the person, as far as the affirmation is clear, right, everyone? The Asha'ira affirm some of the names and attributes of Allah. How many? How many? How many, everyone? You guys are not doing your own work. How many do how many attributes do the Asha'ira affirm? How many? I said this last class. Seven. What are they? والحياة والكلام والبصر سمع إرادة وعلم واقتدر. I mentioned this last class, didn't I? I did mention it, didn't I? Anyway. Now, what's the point of ta'wil? What they do? What do they falsely twist the meaning of? For example, the fingers of Allah. Listen to this weird so-called meaning they established in the Arabic language that indicates there's no establishment linguistically at all in the Arabic language. They say as far as the fingers of Allah, the fingers of Allah, we don't affirm it. We don't say it's fingers. Why do we say something that Allah will create and it will hold the seven heavens and earths on the day of resurrection? Something Allah will create, something. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will create and it will establish that, and that thing will hold up the heavens and the earth. What is he talking about? Due to the fact that the Jew from the time of the Prophet ﷺ approached him. And he even believed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had fingers that befit him. Because Allah affirmed it for himself. And the Messenger affirmed it, ﷺ. Until the point where the Yahud said to the Messenger of Allah, ﷺ, and he was a scholar from amongst their scholars, said, O Muhammad, verily we find that Allah yaj'al as-samawat 'ala isba' wal-ardeen 'ala isba' wal-shajara 'ala isba' wal-ma'a wal-thara 'ala isba' وسائر الخلائق 'ala isba' فيقول أنا الملك فضحك النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حتى بدت نواجذه تصديقا لقول الحبر. To the end of the hadith. He said, O Messenger of Allah, verily we believe and we find in our book that Allah will make the heavens upon a finger, and the heaven and the earths upon a finger, and the trees upon a finger, and the water upon the finger, to the end of the hadith and the rest of the creation. Allah, the Prophet ﷺ smiled, confirming what he said. So the Jews believed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had the attributes of what? Isba' or asabi', the fingers of Allah ta'ala. The Sha'ira say no. They won't believe Allah has fingers. What we believe is, it's a khalqun yakhluquhu Allah. Yuhammilahu ma tahmiluhu al-asabi'. Allah will create a creation that He will allow that thing to carry what fingers carry. Confusing. Weird belief. He said, based upon this, do you find in the Arabic language or anywhere from the scholars of Arabic that the meaning of fingers is something else that's created and that thing carries it for them? You will never find that. This is the type of nonsense that Shaykh al-Islam is speaking about here in regards to the Asha'ira. He said, now listen to this. This is the result of your beliefs. It brings this type of confusion and it brings these type of evil, corruptive notions that you have to realize is confusing and it's leading the people astray and it's instilling in them doubt concerning their Lord. That they reject what Allah affirmed for Himself And they reject what the noble, trustworthy messenger informed them. And taking something as a guidance other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent his final noble prophet with, which is of the utmost of stupidity and nonsense, and the utmost of what? Misguidance. We'll stop here, inshallah. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone?
Yeah.
Those are the affairs of what we're speaking about. We'll conclude, inshallah, how Shaykh al-Islam is also speaking about other affairs in regards to politics and people who legislate laws other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated in regards to punishments. All those affairs we'll talk about tomorrow, inshallah. Any questions about the lesson?
I just wanted to clarify. Earlier you had mentioned that if we believe in two things, then we understand the entire essence of everything that's been going on.
The first affair is that all these matters go back to the denial of Allah's existence. The second one is what Shaykh al-Islam mentioned here. He said the reality of this affair is what these people are saying is, oh people, oh worshippers, don't seek your knowledge of Allah and what He deserves the names and attributes of what we negate from Allah, what we affirm from Him. Don't seek it from the book and nor seek it from the Sunnah. That's the second. But know that all these matters which we're discussing right now all led to the road of atheism. And it all led down to the road of what? Of confusion and instilling inside of the Muslims doubt concerning their religion and where they take as a primary source of guidance. Once you have rocked that and rendered doubt concerning those type of matters, then the Muslims are finished. That's the reason why that a lot of the non-Muslims came and devoured the Muslims based upon the fact that they were able to focus on causing doubt concerning the Muslims and their fundamental of where they take as a primary source. That in itself is very extremely dangerous. That they say, oh, Kitab and Sunnah, we don't need that. We need to seek something, to me, that's more modernized, that's more up to date, that agrees with what's considered not so-called more, or we want to consider it. We're not going to say that Kitab and Sunnah is savagery, but we need to come with something that's more flexible and something that's more better, or something that's modern. You're not realizing that you imprison somebody in jail for 3 life sentences. Do you think that's merciful? Do you really think that's merciful? Do you think that someone being in jail for 30, 40, 50 years of their life is mercy? That's a modernized so-called way of rectifying a person? Or was that making him worse? Which one is it? That's the reason why the people, the majority of those people who are in charge of those institutions, they all say to the individual once he's released, more than likely you'll be back. Because we know your mind's messed up. The only people that survive from being institutionalized when they come out of prison, majority of them that survive are those who are real religious. They're the only ones that survive. They're the only ones that survive. That they're real religious and they embrace the religion of the Wahy of Allah and they penetrate their heart. Other than that, majority of them went back. Because they knew that they messed your mind up. That's the reason why to say that this so-called filthy system of penalizing a person and having them in a cage for 30 or 50 or 60 years of their life is so-called mercy. And then what Allah and His Messenger said is beastry. Are you serious? What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down is a mercy. You get your punishment, you're able to live your life. You get your discipline, you're able to live your life without the greatest of all faculties of your body, brothers and sisters. A person would say, oh, a'udhu billah, a person lose their hand. And plus on top of that in itself is still, you have to learn the ahkam of sadiqah when the hand is cut, and who can cut it, and how it's cut, and all the other affairs that comes along with it. But still in itself, let's just say of fornication and adultery and the things of those affairs, it's still a mercy. Why is it a mercy, everyone? You get your punishment and you keep it moving. The greatest of all faculties in a human being is his mind. It's not his hands, it's not his legs. The greatest of all faculties in your body is that your heart and your mind is intact. If that's messed up, khalas. All evils in the streets emanate, why everyone? The mind is messed up. The way you're thinking is messed up. The heart is messed up. The greatest of all faculties that needs to protect it is the mind and the heart. Everything else can be rectified. And everything else a person can live. But if their mind and their heart is messed up, their life is messed up. And Islam comes to have a punishment where they get it, but at the same time their mind is preserved. America comes to mess up your mind. Being institutionalized messes up your mind. And wallahi, like I said, the only people that survived that life was those who love Allah and His Messenger and love the religion. Those are the only people that survive. And they stayed on steadfast upon uprightness after they were released from prison. But other than that, they know majority of the people, once they know that you're upon the other way, they know them streets are going to get you, you're coming back, you'll be back. Because they know they messed up your aql, they messed up your mind. That's why I despise America and I despise their systems. I despise the way they tell people to eat over here. I despise so much of stuff about this land. How filthy it is and how much I hate this land. Because of how much you love people and you want guidance for them, but they just care about is money. They don't care about the lives of the people here. All they care about is money. All they care about is being filthy greed, filling up their stomachs and making the rich rich and exploiting and destroying the poor. And you think that I would love to be in this country? I want to flee away from this country and make dua that Allah either guide them or destroy this place of what they've done to people here. And what I see every day, that I cry every single day of seeing and hearing thousands and thousands of youth being killed. And how many families cry on the news every day because they lost a loved one from that was 15 or 19 years old. And you get tired of looking at it, and tired of looking at it every day. To the point where sometimes I don't even want to look at it anymore. To make me despise this country and this land more and more every day. Because I know they could do something about it, but they don't, because they know that the violence makes what? Money! That's all they care about in this land. Dang, over people's lives though, and their families? It's that deep? You really gotta keep the pockets of the people filled over the lives of people? Is it that deep, really? Why? So Allah can give you millions and you still be miserable? Because that's what the majority of people are out here. They have billions and they're still miserable. Because you attained it in a way that's not pleasing to your Lord. So Allah gave you the dunya and at the same time you're still miserable. Not caring about the lives of people, which makes me, it's like I said, despise this place. I hate this place. Of how they tell children, how they feed them, how they take care of them, to the end of the nonsense. And what they've destroyed people's families, destroyed their children, destroyed just so many things here. And you just be like, all of this because of the stupid Western mentality over here. How people just don't care about nobody anymore. They're inconsiderate people's lives because of the filth of America and its Western ideologies. Anyway, we'll stop. Any other questions? I'm sorry. I'm off on a tangent. Any other questions? طيب بس we'll continue tomorrow إن شاء الله. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.